Although the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA for short, is cloaked in unfathomable secrecy and controversy, it has long been invisible to the naked eye. Prior till recently, contrary to popular belief, coups are frequently orchestrated and approved from the outside before being interpreted as indicators of regional instability. Instead, they are perceived as internal battles and the expression of a people's desire for regime change. These are not actions by certain citizens to change power, but rather they are the result of gradual processes designed to maintain control over natural resources, financial networks, and geopolitical orders. Although it is difficult to prove CIA covert operations beyond a reasonable doubt, an intricate web of information has been unraveled through study into the agency's operations, declassified papers, and revelations from former personnel. Following the 1960 poisoning of Cameron Felix Muni, here are some African leaders who lost their lives while fighting for the liberation of their people. Patrice Lumumba, the opposition leader of DR Congo, was terminated in 1961. Togo's leader Sylvanus Olympio died in 1963. The head of the Moroccan opposition movement, Mehdi Ben Berka, was abducted in France in 1965, and his body was never discovered. Eduardo Chivambo Mondlane, the president of the Mozambican Liberation Front, Frelimo, which was fighting for independence from the Portuguese, passed away in 1969 due to a panel bomb. And of course, our main focus of this video, Kwame Nkrumah. In this video, we are going to be talking about Ghana's former president, Kwame Nkrumah, the father of African unity, who was brought down by the West. Ghana was known as the Gold Coast Colony when it was colonized by Britain in 1874. The colony's national liberation struggle gained momentum in the late 1940s, and Kwame Nkrumah became a prominent figure in two of the major political parties, the Convention People's Party and the United Gold Coast Convention. Realizing that independence was unavoidable, Britain made an effort to strictly regulate the process. Following the imprisonment of several CPP militants and Nkrumah, the most militant leaders of the National Liberation Movement, in 1950, the colonial governor called elections. Notwithstanding these challenges, the CPP won a landslide victory in the elections and dealt a severe blow to British colonialism. Nkrumah was elected as Prime Minister and subsequently President of Ghana in 1957, when the country became one of the first in Africa to gain independence. Nkrumah was a socialist and Pan-Africanist who launched initiatives to promote Africa's political and economic independence, while the majority of the continent was still under colonial rule. Nkrumah called a conference of the leaders of the 8 then independent African governments in 1958. The inaugural All-African Peoples Conference, which took place in Accra, Ghana, that same year, quickly followed that meeting. Building solidarity among the 300 attendees over the future course of the fight against colonialism and imperialism on the continent was the primary objective of the conference. Nkrumah was instrumental in the creation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, 5 years later. With 32 countries at first, the OAU had 5 declared goals: to uphold African sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence; to eradicate all forms of colonialism from the continent; to coordinate and intensify efforts to achieve a better life for the continent's peoples; to promote international cooperation, with due consideration for the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Nkrumah defined and recognized neo-colonialism, which he believed made a significant contribution to the fight against imperialism. Nkrumah argues in his 1965 book Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, that once a territory has become nominally independent, it is no longer possible, as it was in the last century, to reverse the process. Existing colonies may linger on, but no new colonies will be created. In place of colonialism as the main instrument of imperialism, we have today neocolonialism. The essence of neocolonialism is that the state which is subject to it is, in theory, independent, and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system, and thus its political policy, is directed from the outside. Nkrumah saw that the imperialists were utilizing financial dominance to maintain political control over a large portion of the global south as the official colonial era was coming to an end. Later on, Nkrumah's own nation saw the realization of this. The US government began to view Nkrumah as a threat due to his support for socialism and Pan-Africanism, his willingness to work with the Soviet Union and China, and his contributions to the growth of anti-imperialist consciousness in Africa and around the world. As a result, they initiated plans to remove him from office. A coup supported by the CIA destroys Ghana's socialist experiment. 9 months after Nkrumah was elected to govern an independent Ghana, in December 1957, the National Security Council, the White House, and numerous other federal agencies received a now declassified report titled The Outlook for Ghana from the CIA. The study concluded that a lack of funding in the recently independent nation would impede Nkrumah's goals of quickly modernizing Ghana's economy and expanding Pan-Africanism across the continent. The report's conclusion established a broad framework that guided American policy toward Nkrumah and Ghana. The foundation of Nkrumah's plan to develop Ghana's economy was the Volta Project. It was a hydroelectric project that would provide Ghana with adequate electricity to increase industrial production, especially of aluminum, the country's plentiful natural resource. The Volta Project was funded by the United States government in an effort to keep Ghana from totally aligning with the socialist camp and to give imperialism some control over the nation, as hinted to in the CIA report. However, Nkrumah's steadfast opposition to colonialism and imperialism meant that even American assistance for the Volta Project could not keep the relationship with Ghana from deteriorating, as the CIA had feared. As the relationship between Kwame Nkrumah and the United States continued deteriorating, the United States administration devised a plan to remove Nkrumah from office using the CIA. Mahoney Trimble, the director of the U.S. State Department's Office of West African Affairs, put forward an action program for American strategy in Ghana in 1964, in which he boldly stated, U.S. pressure, if appropriately applied, could induce a chain reaction eventually leading to Nkrumah's downfall. The action program's main elements were psychological warfare to weaken support for Nkrumah within Ghana and swaying the leaders of other African nations against him, as well as a slowdown or cessation of funding for the Volta Project. In February 1966, the United States initiated the process of establishing connections with the Ghanaian forces that ultimately triumphed in a coup against Nkrumah. We may have a pro-Western coup in Ghana soon, wrote Robert Comer of the National Security Council in an internal letter from 1965. A few prominent military and law enforcement officials have been preparing one for a while, and Ghana's collapsing economy might be the catalyst. The memo went on, State believes we're more on the inside than the British, and the plotters are keeping us informed. We and other Western countries, including France, have been helping to set up the situation by ignoring Nkrumah's pleas for economic aid, even though I'm told we're not directly involved. Furthermore, there is strong evidence linking the CIA directly to the coup. The New York Times was informed in 1978 by first-hand intelligence sources that the CIA counseled and assisted the coup plotters. The New York Times report also notes that John Stockwell, a 12-year CIA employee, wrote the book In Search of Enemies, which lends credence to this assertion. In order to prevent Nkrumah and the CPP from seizing back power, the US administration moved quickly to offer diplomatic and financial assistance for the coup government following the coup. Among other things, 500 tons of milk were delivered to help ease the suffering that the United States had been assisting just a few months prior. There are obvious similarities between Nkrumah's vision for Africa and the views of the current generation of African leaders who oppose neo-colonialism. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Assimi Goïta of Mali are cutting ties with the West while working with Russia. In order to effectively counter the probable onslaught of future attacks, it is necessary for every African to be educated on the history of American engagement in Ghana and throughout Africa. This history demonstrates how American imperialism will employ a combination of political, economic, and, if necessary, military combat tactics to thwart the emergence of independent African nations. But these tried and true strategies of neo-colonialism are about to face their most difficult tests. Yet, as US imperialism's standing in the world declines, anti-imperialist consciousness grows within Africa, and more nations keep joining the ranks of those unwilling to submit to colonial domination. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.